What's up, y'all? As you're adding theater performances to your end of the year calendar, remember in Chicago, you ain't just got to watch the shows, but you can also be a part of them. That's probably no truer than that the Second City's best kept secret tell everyone at their ETC theater. The 6-person ensemble takes everything you know and love about the iconic venue, the sketches, the songs and dance and the improv, and delivers a one-of-a-kind experience Thursdays through Sundays. Tickets are available now at secondcity.com. Today on CityCast Chicago, Pitchfork Summer Festival is officially leaving the city. We've got updates on a back and forth budget season, and this weekend is National Take a Hike Day. Joining me to break it all down, freelance journalist Britt Julius and Injustice Watch's senior reporter Maya Dukmasova. It's Friday, November 15th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Morning, my friends. Good to see you again. Britt, how you feeling?
I'm feeling okay.
I completely understand. Maya, what about you? It's good to see you again on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm also having trouble, keeping my clown mask on these days.
100%. Having a job that forces us to put on some kind of face, some kind of voice, it can be extremely draining, but I do appreciate y'all still saying yes to coming on the podcast and then joining us. For all of our listeners and readers who are here today, I want to thank everybody who tuned in to CityCast Chicago this day. This week on the podcast, we have talked about a lot of things, including on Monday, we asked, how do Chicago property taxes work and why are they so damn high? Tuesday, we dived into what this Trump administration could mean for the Red Line extension to the far south side. On Wednesday, we talked about Friendsgivings, dinner parties, potlucks, cookouts, and what Chicago dishes you pulling up with. And yesterday, we dug into the history of Chicago's underground. I'm talking the Pedway, Lower Wacker, Lower Wacker, Lower Wacker. And today, we've got our friends in to look back on some big stories from the week. But before we jump into that, as I said, on Wednesday, we were celebrating all things Friendsgiving. I don't know about y'all, but I have a few celebrations that are not just my Thanksgiving with my family. And I personally haven't decided if I'm going to cook something, if I'm going to just go out and get something. And so I've tried to crowdsource what other people are doing. Britt, I'm going to start with you. For your Friendsgiving, are you cooking? Are you picking up something? And if so, what are you doing?
So I always host a Friendsgiving every year before traditional Thanksgiving. And yeah, this is going to be the 11th year of me doing it. So
oh my God, you putting up Pitchfork numbers.
Yeah. I've been doing it for a while in multiple apartments. And some of the constants that I always do, I always make a really great dressing. Just everyone loves it. It's always a hit. I've made it literally every year since I've started. And I'm like, well, this is what we're doing. But I think I also do it because I have not been allowed to take over dressing duties for my family. We have our own, so I was like, well, someone's getting a taste of it, at least once a year. I make a really great cornbread, and I started incorporating my recipe for macaroni and cheese, inspired by my mom's recipe, which was inspired by my grandma's recipe, but I have a little bit of a twist on it. So I started making that a couple years ago. It's been a hit. I often get invited to parties just to bring it. It feels like...
Britt, I feel like we need to cut this minute and 30 and send it to your family. Because it's like the nicest humble brag I've ever heard. He's like, hey, my dressing is the shit. My mac and cheese is fire. I've pulled the recipes from my grandmother and my mother and made it even better. My cornbread to die for. And I just been doing it for 11 years with her. I just been holding it down or whatever. I love that for you, Britt. Maya, what are you doing for Friendsgiving? Are you hosting something? And if so, what are you excited to share with everybody?
Yeah, I am hosting this year. We're not traveling to see any family for Thanksgiving this year, so our Friendsgiving is our Thanksgiving. And this year, like every year, my favorite thing to bring to the table, I'll probably be cooking most of the things, but my favorite thing always is the sweet potato pie. The recipe I use is from columnist Jamel Bouie's mom. he shared it with me like probably about a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking about sweet potato pie. I was like, what? I've never heard of this. And he shared his mom's recipe. And I have been just blowing people's pants off with this recipe ever since.
Yes, everybody brag about how good they is whipping it up. Every single Friday, we bring in these amazing people to look back on some of the big stories happening in our city, some of the stories we all think deserve a little bit more attention. And like every episode, we go in with some good news. But let's start with, depending on if you've been or not, how much you love music festivals could be bad news for you. And that was the announcement that Pitchfork's music festival, which has been held in Chicago for the last almost 2 decades, is wrapping up its time at Union Park and not moving to some other park in the city of Chicago, as far as we know, moving out of the city. Britt, what was your reaction to this news?
I was devastated. Pitchfork was the first music festival that of that kind that I've, really went to. I went in college when you could pay $25 for a 1-day ticket, so those kind of prices just don't exist anymore for music festivals.
I'm sorry, I was finna do the Kevin Hart to Don Cheadle real quick. Damn. $25, damn.
I love telling people that. I'm like, it used to be $25 for 1 day. Like, it was so affordable, because I was working on campus making $200 every 2 weeks. So I was like, I can make that work. I can do, $25 for 1 day. But yeah, it was devastating. I could tell that there were a lot of changes during the festival that took place this past summer. There was a much greater emphasis for VIP tickets, for the kind of plus tickets as well. So people having more elevated experiences that would mimic those larger music festivals like a Lollapalooza. So elevated sight lines and, special food and all these kind of amenities definitely seemed like it was a way to garner more, more money from the festival itself. So I guess in some ways I was surprised and not surprised, because it seemed like they were really interested in trying to make more money this last year compared to years past. And with the other changes that have happened to Pitchfork as a publication as a whole, and sort of eliminating most of their staff, really sort of reducing the amount of content that they're releasing and producing on a day-to-day basis, it's not surprising. I mean, Condé Nast said that they had plans to sort of fold Pitchfork into GQ. They've mentioned that they're kind of focused on this particular male audience that they're trying to get as well. So the festival, as it currently stands, and what their sort of goals are from Condé Nast, I think it just didn't really align with each other.
Yeah, I got to go to Pitchfork's festival the last few years. I mean, I saw Yaya Bay was my favorite last year. Brittany Howard this past summer. I was there with some of my childhood friends, my girlfriend. We all had a great time. But even when that festival was coming up, I remember our marketing director, Caroline Patton, kind of being like, man, this could be the last one. And at the time, I had no sense of why she was saying that, right? I don't have this long history with the festival to see how it had changed over the years.
I would say I definitely felt there were years in the past where I thought like maybe this won't happen again. One of those years was when Pitchfork moved from its offices from Chicago to New York to Brooklyn. I thought, are they going to maintain the festival here? They still did for many years after that. So that was quite a surprise. And I think one of the reasons why is, at least from the music journalism standpoint, a lot of music journalists would kind of consider it almost like a homecoming for us. So people would come in from all over the city or all over the country, all over the globe, specifically for this festival, because it was cost effective. Chicago's not an expensive place to stay. They could maybe get VIP and things like that. So it became that kind of experience. I also thought that it might have ended when it got bought by Condé Nast, which is, a publishing arm that is really rooted in New York City.
They got Vogue, GQ, The New Yorker.
All the biggies. Yeah, like all the big publications. And so it just, in my mind, I was like, okay, well, why would they continue in Chicago? We're losing more of those sort of hometown roots and things like that. But the festival continued to be, largely planned by, people who live and work here in Chicago. Really, for me, what sort of signaled a major change is that I wasn't hearing that days were being sold out like they had been in the past, right? So it would, you would consistently hear like Sunday night sold out or the whole weekend sold out, things like that. And even though they had these really great headliners, it still just wasn't selling in the same capacity that it had previously. And maybe that was due to the overall costs. Maybe it was due to the headliners, but I don't necessarily think that it was due to the lineups as well. I think they really diversified their lineups throughout the years as well, and tried to reach a variety of different sort of age ranges as well. Like when they had the Isley Brothers, that's one of my favorite memories at Pitchfork, and they definitely wouldn't have had that, maybe in 2009, but it really showed an effort to expand what the idea of what the festival could actually be.
I feel like Chicago is at an interesting point with its major music festivals. You had the drama of Riot Fest leaving the city, coming back, and they've always had a tumultuous relationship, unless you let them tell it, with the neighborhood, with festival goers. You saw, Silver Room Block Party, Hyde Park Summerfest leaving. Do you think when festivals like this leave, even given all of the drama that can surround them, do you think it's ultimately a loss for the city of Chicago?
I do. I think, for a long period of time, Chicago, at least in the summer, was really being defined by having so many music festivals, and that you could kind of get a taste of everything, right? You could get, hip hop, jazz, blues, indie rock, electronic music, different forms of electronic music, right? So kind of that, a little bit of something for everyone. And, the more that we lose, one, I think, especially with festivals like the, Silver Room Block Party and things like that, you're really sort of losing that community touchstone. But, with the festivals in general, we're really just sort of losing a large essence of what makes for a Chicago summer.
This episode is brought to you by Mubi, a global streaming service dedicated to elevating great films. Stream beautiful hand-picked cinema anytime, anywhere. And starting today, you can catch the streaming premiere of The Substance. Demi Moore delivers a career-best performance as an A-lister past her prime, lured by a mysterious drug that transforms her into a hotshot 20-something played by Margaret Qualley. The catch? She must split her time evenly between both bodies. Now, what could possibly go wrong in this plot? The film is a deliriously entertaining and spine-tingling masterpiece. You can start streaming The Substance and more for 30 days free. Yes, free at Mubi.com/CityCast. That's MUBI.com/CityCast, all one word. We are currently in our ongoing budget season, and right now the mayor faces stiff opposition to a proposed $300 million property tax hike, which he announced during his budget address. We face a difficult decision between mass layoffs of city employees and this tax increase. And then in the midst of expected uproar from alders earlier this week, the mayor said, as a public school teacher, sometimes we do things to get people's attention. And so now that we have the attention of everyone, I've said from the very beginning that this is a proposal, which I guess to me in some ways makes it feel like this $300 million, or he's at least selling this $300 million number as maybe some ways a scare tactic or a bargaining tactic to like get people to get serious on thinking about increased revenue. Maya, what are your thoughts on this very critical budget season, $1 billion budget gap looming, and the coverage around it thus far?
Well, this was just to get your attention. It continues to be another one in the string of long, strange PR decisions. Overall, like I spent a lot of last week sitting in the city council budget hearings, and the thing that I find most frustrating in the conversation around this budget and around the need for revenue is actually the news coverage around the idea of raising property taxes. I think it's important to remember that like Mayor Rahm Emanuel passed the $700 million property tax increase. And that ended up meaning that people had a few $100s more to pay in property taxes every year. What's proposed here is less than half of the property tax increase people saw under Rahm Emanuel. And overall, like if you look, I'm looking at my property tax bill right now for this conversation. The city of Chicago accounts for a quarter of this bill. More than half of this property tax bill is property taxes we're paying for Chicago public schools, which are a separate taxing body. This is not what's being discussed right now in this budget. The city of Chicago provides the services that keep you able to navigate the city, keep you safe, keep you healthy. These are essential. These are essential quality of life services. So I guess what I wish I could see more of is, instead of tons and tons of headlines whipping up people's fears about like getting crushed by their property tax bills, what would the increase be to individual taxpayers if this property tax passed? The news coverage around this idea of raising property taxes is always implies that this is like outrageous and scary to people. Then the people in city council pick that up and talk about it like it's unacceptable. And it's frankly, a lot of these budget hearings have nothing to do with discussing the budget or talking about other ideas that could viably increase cities' revenue if we really don't want to raise property taxes or raise them that much. Like, these older people, first of all, these hearings are half empty. A lot of people aren't there, which lets you know how much these actually matter. This is just theater. This is not where the decisions are actually made. You're supposed to be discussing the budget, So it's I'm always disappointed by the theater of these council hearings, but I'm more disappointed in the way the media treats these property tax hike proposals.
What are your suggestions for, in addition to not only making it clear, like, what would this percentage mean for individual property owners, but like, how should we be framing this conversation?
We have to decouple this notion that like property taxes are bad and they're going to ruin your life and they're going to make it impossible for you to live in Chicago. I'm not denying that property tax bills are very burdensome to people, a lot of lower income homeowners especially. We had a history in this county of unfair, corrupt property tax assessments that disproportionately burdened lower income homeowners in lower income neighborhoods where the property values were lower. People were paying way more than their fair share of taxes for decades. We had this reform-minded new assessor come into office, Friendsgiving, a few years ago to start right-sizing the system. And this system is getting right sizes. Like, property tax assessments are getting fairer. That's a reality that's just, there is some positive news there. But I think overall, generally, people feel mad about having to pay taxes. They feel like they're paying an unfair amount of taxes. They're paying too much. There have to be ways to talk about property taxes, like, this is what it just means to live in a city, and this is what it means to be in community. Like, it costs more to fill potholes now because like the price of asphalt is XYZ. We need to talk about why things cost what they do. So evil property taxes that are going to whip up resentment towards the city, like that is a headline is old, that's decades old, and we need to stop leading with that.
We're going to kind of start the good news a little bit earlier. Britt, you recently published a story where you sat down with legendary DJ Dwayne Powell. What was that conversation like for you?
It was really interesting. So I was commissioned to do this piece by Portable Gray, which is a publication out of the University of Chicago. And I've been working specifically with them on this piece to look at Dwayne's work as a music historian. So he's best known as a DJ to many people, but he has in fact been having these really long, profound conversations called rear view mirror sessions that he hosts, and basically going into the depths of different artists, some who have, connections to Chicago and some who don't, but really kind of going into, their earliest work all the way into, where they are presently, and how their sort of music and their art has sort of shaped music as we understand it today. Dwayne was really interested in, obviously records, but also different types of artifacts, how different elements of the past kind of informed these artists' works, their songs, their samples, all this kind of stuff in the present as well. He's really sort of transformed his career outside of just being a DJ, even though he's an incredible DJ as well, just so profound, but also sort of bringing music history lessons to the people in a way that they can understand, process, and really enjoy as well.
As a long-term music critic, like, what role do you think these like amazing Chicago DJs, whether they're legends like Dwayne Powell, whether they're up and comers like Cash Era, what role do you see them playing in preserving Chicago's rich musical legacy?
That's a great question. I feel like, outside of people who maybe have a really intense interest in, studying one specific aspect of Chicago's, musical history, whether it is, I've met academics who focus on, juke music and focus on house and things like that. I think that the DJs are real, true musical historians, not just because they have this wide knowledge of different forms of music, different artists, different genres, etc., but because they are pulling things from the past, or they're pulling things in the present that they believe have value. So it's usually those DJs who are preserving the music in the present, saying this has real, true value and deserves to be heard by more people. That's certainly how, I discovered so many different artists. I mean, I grew up in a very musical home. Father played so many instruments, took over our basement with lots of them too, and like lots of records and things like that. But, my knowledge of music was really sort of like cemented by like what my parents listened to, or, what was kind of like up and poppin' when I was young. So that was like a lot of 90s, 2000 R&B, hip hop, things like that, right? It was the DJs that I began to communicate with, whose sets I began to go to, whose sets I began to listen to on platforms like SoundCloud, that introduced me to so many other artists, so many other genres that I never would have known before. And so these local DJs, they're really doing important work, especially because we don't have like, a number of different outlets. We don't have tons of music publications, things like that, to really preserve that musical history and legacy in the city of Chicago.
We're going to drop this amazing sit down you had with Dwayne Powell in our show notes. Maya, over to you. You recently published some good news in relation to you and your colleague Alejandra Cancino's major investigation, the tenant trap. We did a sit down with you all, I believe, a couple of months ago. Can you remind people about your investigation? What were some of your major findings, and what are some of the most recent updates?
Yeah, so the tenant trap was our investigation that we conducted over the course of more than a year with Alejandro Cancino. We basically did a massive data analysis of the intersection between eviction court records and building code violation records in Chicago. And we identified a universe of like 2,600 buildings in the city of Chicago that have a chronic history of serious code violations, potentially dangerous and hazardous stuff like fire safety issues in the building, plumbing issues in the building that could cause standing water and various diseases to spread, infestations, that sort of stuff. And we analyzed eviction court records to find that in most of these buildings, people were getting taken to eviction court at the same time as the city was citing these buildings for these serious code violations. And in hundreds of these buildings, people were getting taken to eviction court for non-payment of rent at the same time as the city of Chicago was suing the landlords for the severity of the code violations at the property. But the good news that the story that we just published is about a direct response to our reporting, actually. The chief judge Timothy Evans has issued a new order that entitles tenants, or actually anybody who is involved in an eviction court proceeding, to request and quickly receive information about pending housing court cases at the same property or ones that were recently closed. So if you're a tenant and you're with, there's problems in your building, there's unaddressed, issues, the boiler's not working, the roof is leaking, whatever, and you wind up in eviction court, and your defense for not paying the rent or not paying all of the rent is that, well, there are these problems that the landlord is failing to address. You can now bolster your case with evidence from this other court process that's happening just 3 floors away, where the city is suing the landlord over these issues. So in the story, you can find it at injusticewatch.org. We actually embedded the chief judge's order. It's just a 1-page thing that explains exactly the process that people can undertake to request this information. You can make the request via email, and the clerk's office is required to provide the information within 5 business days, and actually within 48 hours if the person is already imminently facing eviction. So it's a very small kind of tweak in the system, because even if this information is provided, like, it doesn't guarantee that the judge in the eviction court case is going to say, your landlord is being sued for these code violations. Inspectors from the city of Chicago are saying that the roof is missing. There's no guarantee the judge in the eviction court case is going to take that into consideration or weigh that any certain way. A lot of times tenants bring in their own photos of the problems, and the judges don't, they're not necessarily looking at them. But the record that is presented in these housing court lawsuits that the city files, these are licensed building code inspectors that are sworn in and testify about the problems in court. So it's kind of a legally more robust record than anything tenants can provide individually on their own. So potentially some good news for people trying to fight their evictions.
Every single episode ends the exact same way. Me begging you to please come back for the next episode on Monday. In the meantime, in between time, some good news. Britt, you've got some great news to share with CityCast Chicago today. What is it?
Yes, well, it's great news to me. It's kind of silly, but
it's great news for all of us.
So last month I launched I've been calling it like a short-term newsletter about Christmas culture, how it has changed, evolved, adapt, warped, gone crazy over the last couple of years. It comes out weekly. And so I've covered everything from the concept of a Christmas number 1 and how that's moved to the United States, which never existed before. So like 10 years ago, if you look, the number 1 song on Christmas Day was Blank Space by Taylor Swift, and now, it's usually Mariah Carey or Brenda Lee and things like that.
Oh, so this is like a recent phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's largely due to, Billboard changing their streaming numbers or their streaming sort of means, right? So before you had to like buy the record for it to actually reach number 1. Now, since they're just sort of counting any streams as they happen, that's how you can get, All I Want for Christmas finally reaching number 1. And so, so just talking about, how that culture has changed and adapt over the years. And it's been like a really fun kind of project for me, something that's, kind of, I can turn my brain off and just sort of explore, but also sort of look at things from a critical angle. I have the next edition is going to be coming out same day as this podcast. I'm talking about the rise of different types of Christmas decor. So like Grinch Christmas, if you've ever seen that
yes,
before.
I have.
Yeah, Grinch Christmas, Pink Christmas, Minimalist Christmas, how social media sort of fuels those trends as it relates to decorating styles and what that really says about how people are celebrating the holiday. Chicago has now kind of become a trendy location as it relates to Christmas, and it's also kind of considered a good budget Christmas destination compared to New York. And so we're sort of seeing that reflected in a lot of Christmas movies as well. Like the Hallmark Channel has 3 Chicago set Christmas movies and a Hanukkah set Christmas movie as well. So really sort of just showing the appeal and changing demographics and things like that.
We will drop a link with like all the other things we talked about in this episode in our I'm leaving that blank space for you at home, whether you listen to like 1 or 2 times for you to go in the show notes, Kobe. We get it. Maya, over to you. You got some good news for us today?
I've got some good news about a recently completed woodworking project, just in time for the holidays, and I'm going to show it to you all right now on camera. Listeners can't see, but it is a
that look a little
cherry wood serving tray with pull-out wings that I made with my own bare hands in my woodworking class at the Chicago Industrial Arts and Design Center in Rogers Park, where I've been doing woodworking since the summer of 2023. I've been taking classes there and learning how to make stuff out of wood. So it's been an incredible delight to discover this new hobby.
People can't see my face, but I've just been like sitting here so excited for you this entire time. One, because that pull-out mechanism looked like it works extremely smoothly. Yeah, you can see the different grain. It is so beautiful. Absolutely love that. I'm gonna round us out with some good news. I got a couple of events for people Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. On Friday, there's a screening of The Light of Truth, Richard Hunt's monument to Ida B. Wells. It's the winner of the Audience Choice Award for Best Documentary at the 60th Chicago International Film Festival. That screening is happening tonight at 6:30 at Hamilton Park Cultural Center in Inglewood. You can also see the Ida B. Wells Monument, Light of Truth, in Bronzeville. On Saturday, there's a sip and thrift event at Simone's in Pilsen. That's going to be taking place from 12 to 5. And then on Sunday is National Take a Hike Day. And so we'd love to hear from you all. 773-780-0246. What are some of your favorite places in the Chicagoland area to get out for a good hike? As always, I appreciate our guests for joining us today. From Injustice Watch senior reporter Maya Dukmasova. Maya, always good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me on.
And Tribune music critic Britt Julius.
Thank you. So great being here.
Before we get out of here, I want to give a huge thank you to our entire CityCast Chicago team, our executive producer, Simone Alicea, our producers, Michelle Navarro, our Hey Chicago newsletter editor, Sydney Madden, our roving producers, Elizabeth Kama. The music we all love is from Sam Thousand, All the Kimonos, and Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop. And my last thank you, as it is every episode, every week, is for you, the people who read Hey Chicago, the people who listen to CityCast Chicago. I appreciate it. My last favor, be back here bright and early on Monday. Peace. It's not even a debate, but the conversation between pumpkin pie and sweet potato pie. I just hear the voice of Bernie Mac in my head. I ain't never had no pumpkin pie.